Hi everyone. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to put together these bins that fit into these used up reels of filament and give you some tips. If you'd like to use these particular bins that I designed, there are other ones out there. People have repurposed these bins before. If you like mine or you're interested in mine, you could try them out and follow the steps for the best possible assembly, the easiest possible assembly with no hiccups. Also, I've got other details for these that I'm going to be uploading to Thingiverse and making available for download. Um, little labels, decorations, things like that, just little add-on things. So, first of all, what you want to do is make sure that you have something for exhaust, because when you're attaching these to the reels, you're going to end up melting some polystyrene plastic. These are typically made out of polystyrene. Um, it's possible that some will not be, but so far what I've encountered is that they're made out of polystyrene, and you could really tell, even if it's not properly labeled, you could just tell by the smell. I mean, there's other ways to tell too. You could tell by the temperature that it starts to melt or deform at, but these are definitely polystyrene. You don't want to breathe that stuff in. Even when you're working with PLA, I mean, typically you don't want to breathe in any kind of fumes. But polystyrene is much nastier than PLA. So make sure you have exhaust. The other thing is you want to make sure that you have a nice setup. I'm working on this reel up here, so I have it lifted to a comfortable working height. And then what you're going to want to do for this design is get all of your bins in place. Now these bins, actually, side note, um, these bins were printed with an error. My original design, my first test, I printed out 6 of them, and then I realized that there was a mistake in the file, and I later went back, I corrected it, but I had already printed out these bins. So basically, I went and designed another variation so that these could all fit and fill up an entire reel. So the ones that are going to be available for download are going to be the intended design, not these. But for demonstration purposes, it doesn't matter. So what you're going to want to do, get all your bins loaded into a reel. Use something preferably elastic to get everything centered and snug. Of course, you could, use any kind of string to tie it, really, but elastic gives you the best fit. And then you're going to want to slide in these rails into place, get everything into position. And then what you're going to do is pin these into location by using a soldering iron with a fine tip. You just need enough to get it to stay in place. It doesn't have to be super strong. We're just pinning it into place so that we could remove the bins and then fuse these to the reel with some more adhesion. So now I'll go ahead and flip on the power supply for the soldering iron, and the temperature, we'll leave it there. Doesn't have to be exact. Okay, and I'm gonna want to work in the location where my exhaust is going to pick up the fumes. So, of course, actually, I should give you a better view. Bring the camera around like this and make sure I can see what I'm doing. So, you're just going to basically poke it so that your hitting both the reel and the rail. The reel and the rail. And that'll tack it into place. I am looking from the side. I don't know if I'm really hitting it accurately. I should move so that I can see what I'm doing. So you just give it a poke. It's okay. If it doesn't look perfect right now, it's gonna move some of the plastic around. It's gonna squish out. You could fix that later. You can clean it up. Just get it tacked into place. I should have put something above this bin. Though it's not as crucial now. It's more crucial for the next step, but I could have done it already. So basically, you don't want there to be a gap above the bin. You don't want it to lift up like that when you're working on it. So basically, you just want to put in some shims. Could be anything, just some scrap stuff, some paper, some cardboard, corrugated plastic, something. You want to stick something above your bins so that there's no gaps and things won't be able to lift up when you're working on them. Now, that's going to be more crucial in the next step. Tacking them into place is not that much of an issue. You see my finger on top, I could just push down and push down with my finger. I could push down to hold the bins down for now, but in the next step, you're not going to be able to do that because we're going to be pushing from the bottom in just a little bit, and we want to make sure we don't lift up the rail. Also, the bins are going to be removed. In the next step, we're going to have the bins taken out, and we're going to poke up from the bottom of the reel. And when you do that, the rail is going to want to move. So you're going to need something clamping it down from above. So you're going to need to stick some spacers in there. Something to take up the space in between the rails and the reel. Okay, so now that that's all tacked into place, we'll just check it, make sure that everything is actually tacked. As you notice, as I slide these out, the rails are staying in place. That is a good thing. It's a good. Wonderful. It doesn't take much. You see, I could slide my fingers over these and they are in place. Now for the next step, we're going to get something to fill this space here so that we're pushing down on these rails. Because the next step is we come in again with the soldering iron from this side and we push in. And when you do that, it's going to obviously want to push these rails up. Now, you could use glue. You don't have to use heat for this, okay? If you take the glue approach or some other kind of adhesive, then you're not going to deal with that. I like trying to use heat as much as possible because you don't introduce any new materials to the project. But I mean, in some applications, glue is the best thing to use, whatever glue it might be, or adhesive, or epoxy. But in this case, I'm showing you how to do it if you want to take the soldering iron approach, the heat approach. It's up to you if you want to use some other way. If you use another way, then you don't need to follow all of the steps in this video, unless you just find it interesting to watch anyway. So I don't want to spend forever looking for something to take up the space. So I'm going to settle with something that is very close. It's going to work. I mean, it's a really hard foam, but it's still going to be affected by the heat, which is a downside, because inevitably I'm going to end up poking through here, unless I'm like really careful about how far I put the soldering iron in. Basically, I'm going to end up poking into this foam, and it's going to melt the foam a little bit, which means, you know, we're going to contaminate our workpiece. It doesn't really matter, but, you know, there might be instances where it would matter. But so we're just going to, with this block of foam, let's see, sneak one more in there, add the corrugated plastic, make it a little tighter. Okay, so there we go. Now that's nice and tight, holding down the rails so that they will not lift. And then the next thing is, where did I put it? Here it is. A very simple but effective little jig for lining up the rail. So you slide this over. Easy to make at home. You just, you know, use any kind of stiff material. It just has to be stiff enough, like a card stock or a literal card, and make sure that your straight edge, you know, if you end up cutting something in half with scissors like this, you know, the left edge here is not perfectly straight, so make sure your straight edge is lined up with your rail so that you know where to poke your soldering iron in, and then you're good to go. So now, I know I said I'm inevitably going to end up poking through, but, you know, I'll try to be careful. I would prefer not to poke through. I don't want to poke into the foam, and, you know, even though it's not going to melt that much, I would just prefer not to. So soldering iron's on, exhaust fan is on. So now we just go in and we do a little poke right about there, and just gently let it go in a little bit, pull it out, and then go up a little bit. Now you don't want to plunge it in so much, not just because you don't want to poke whatever's holding your rail down, but the more you plunge it in on this first plunge, or in general, is that you're gonna drive plastic material out of the area where you're plunging into. You're gonna create these little rings around, these lifted rings, and then that's more stuff that you gotta clean up, because you need this surface to be completely flat when you're all done, since it's going to be riding over the ball bearings. Of course, it's only really crucial in the diameter where they're going to actually be riding over the ball bearings. This entire surface is not going to come in contact with the ball bearings, but basically this outer ring. So you don't want any bumps on that outer ring. But also you don't want any bumps anywhere else either, because if they're too big, you know, they might lift up the reel a little bit. Like if you're stacking the reels, you also got to consider putting them on top of your other reels. And that's it. So now we just repeat that step all the way around, and then clean it up. And then if you really want to get insane with it, you could fill it up with some material, with a 3D pen, or you could even still use the soldering iron again if you want to push material in there and melt it with the soldering iron. So let's just take out the spacer and check on it. And let's get a good angle so we can see that. I'm sorry, let me get that focused. Zoom in and maybe turn on the light too. So we can see that it is nice and flush. Oh, come on. That rail, which is now adhered in multiple spots, is nice and flush. So you want to make sure that you clamp it down with that spacer. Now I'm going to go ahead and finish doing all the rails on this. Also do this one as well, and maybe even a third reel, and then I'll do the last video, which will be cleaning this up and also maybe adding some extra strength, filling in those holes, and making sure that it is as secure as possible.